Hello everybody, welcome back to my game review. Today I want to talk about a eternal power supply versus just a power supply like this. But basically I'm talking about a power supply on the outside versus a power supply on the inside where you just need to have a cable. So I know a lot of people do not like the fact that some game consoles stopped using this. So Xbox used to use power supplies like this. Consoles like the PlayStation 2 Super Slim used the power supply because it was supposed to shrink down the console a little bit. N64 uses the power supply, the Atari uses power supply, Nintendo Wii uses a power supply, and all of those consoles use the power supply on the outside. They use a power brick instead of a power cord. But I've always been on this side over this side, and I'll tell you the reasons why. When your power supply breaks, if it's a power supply brick, you can easily replace it. You can go on Amazon or eBay and just pick out a new power supply for your game console. But if it's a power supply on the inside of your system, like the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 2 Fat, if it's like Xbox One Slim, the Xbox One X, Xbox Series S, the X, PS5, if those consoles power supply breaks, you can't just replace a power brick. You have to actually go into the system, you have to actually tear it apart, and you have to actually take the power supply out physically, then buy the power supply online, then you have to take it all apart and then put a power supply back in. And I think that is more of a hassle. Now, people prefer this because it's less cables, it's less cords, and it looks less messy. And I do agree with that. I understand completely that, yeah, this looks a lot more messy, it's all over the place, and you have this heavy power brick that just, sits on the floor, or sits wherever. I got my Nintendo Wii one over there, right there, and it's a huge power supply. And now my original Xbox One has a big old power supply. But honestly, I will always defend using the power supply on the outside of a console instead of an inside power supply. And my reasons are very simple. It's because this is easier to replace. This is easier to just have. And, let's say you have a power supply inside your PlayStation 5, inside your PlayStation 4 system, or whatever console it is. Let's say that power supply goes bad, or a capacitor busts, or something like that. It's a lot more of a hassle. It's a lot more difficult. Yeah, I can replace a PlayStation 3 Super Slim power supply. I can replace my PS4 power supply on the inside. But again, you risk breaking your game system. Again, you have to actually open it up. It's not really the easiest thing to do. But if you have a power supply on the outside, if this breaks, if this has some kind of issue on the inside, you just go online, you buy a new power supply, you obviously plug it up to the system, and then there you go. You don't need it anymore. You don't need to worry anymore because, of course, when you buy a little outside power supply, I'm just going to call it outside power supply because I keep forgetting the name for it. But, when you use these, they're easy to replace. So if this power supply was to break, and I couldn't use my PlayStation 2 Slim, the first thing I would do is be like, okay, it must be the power supply. So I would buy a new power supply, and if my PlayStation 2 Slim has a red light, that means it works, and the power supply was easily changed out. While with an inside power supply, again, not many people know how to take apart the system, and not many people really care to. So, for me, I will always defend and always be on the side of outside power supplies. And I know there's people that would be like, oh, it's more of a pain because of all the cables that you need and because you got this big brick out. But it's not really that big of a deal. And if you have an outside power supply, it's a lot more fixable than one that's on the inside because, again, you can just easily search up the power supply for your game console. And if it's an outside power supply, you just buy this brick that has the power stuff on the inside, and it's a very easy replacement. I've done it before. I've replaced power supplies before for systems that have a outside power supply. And it's awesome to do that because your system just works again. But with an inside power supply, it's a lot more difficult. There's a lot more things that have to be done. With an inside power supply, if it goes bad, you have to unscrew all the screws in your game console. You have to take the entire thing apart. You have to, unplug it from the system and hopefully not break any of the cables in there, and hopefully not damage anything while doing this. And then you have to leave your system, just kind of like take it apart until you get your new power supply, and you have to obviously plug everything back in, and hopefully whatever instructions you got online or whatever, or if you just kind of like do it yourself, hopefully the system doesn't get damaged and just doesn't work forever. So I'm a huge outside power supply guy. I will say that, I do like just having a cable. I do like just having a simple cable with nothing attached to it because, yeah, it's less messy. But if I'm looking at, like, a reliability perspective or, like, what will last longer perspective, I think that I always have to go with this option because, again, it's very easy to replace power supplies when they're on the outside. Much easier. And I think that it would be cool if the original PlayStation 4 or any of the PS4s had a power supply on the outside, because I would prefer that over having to actually replace my power supply on the inside one day, because I know I'm probably going to have to after like 10 or 20 more years. I'll probably have to replace my inside power supply and hopefully not break my console. But anyway, I'm in the video. I just wanted to make a video on a outside power supply versus a inside power supply, and just kind of the positives to having, well, really both of them. There's some positives. Again, this is less messy, this is more messy, but easy to replace, hard to replace. And let me also say this: when you replace your inside power supply for any console, you have to actually look to see what model of the system do you have, because PlayStation 4 systems, you can't just easily replace a power supply and be done with it. You have to actually look for numbers to see which version do you have, which just makes it an even bigger mess. But there is positives and negatives to both sides, but I'm on this side. But anyway, tell me in the comments below what you think about a outside power supply versus a inside power supply. Which one do you prefer? Do you think that this is a better option? Or do you think that this is a better option when it comes to game systems? Do you think that we should have consoles that use this more, or do you think we should have consoles that kind of just stick with this? But for me, I like using this option because, again, convenience and easier to replace, and I think it's just much better. Plus, your game console doesn't have to have this massive power supply in it, which I think is actually better. It's like the original Xbox One console. It's like really empty on the inside because there's no giant power supply. So I kind of actually like that. Instead of everything being like smashed together with the power supply next to everything. But anyway, I'm in the video, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like on the video and tell me what you like better. Do you like an outside power supply, or do you like an inside power supply? And you can tell me your reasoning in the comment section below. Apparently, I have a USB cable that was attached to my power supply. That doesn't belong now. There we go, much better. Anyway, I'm in the video, so peace.